Hello and welcome to the latest Hammer Horror and Order. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with the Professor Smoke.
Yep.
And we are from the All American Spook Show podcast, which you can find right here on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcast every Monday at 6 p.m. East. We also encourage you to check out all the other stuff here on our YouTube channel, including Video Vortex and Grindhouse Gutter. So pretty much every week, every month, we've got some cool stuff going on here on the channel. So we encourage you to go search around. And of course, like, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, all that jazz. You know, if you watch enough stuff on YouTube, everybody tells you that. So you know the drill. Go do that, please. Also feel free to comment. You know, if we make any mistakes or anything like that, drop us some comments down below. So because we have had, you know, some things called out to us, and that gets me to one of the little side notes here that we're doing the last couple months is we're calling these Hammer Horror and Order addendums because some viewers and listeners of the podcast and of this series noticed that there were a few thrillers and horror movies that we had left out. So we went back and we've been filling in the gaps. Like we went back and watched The Snorkel from 1958, The Stranglers of Bombay from 59. Just last month we watched Never Take Candy from a Stranger from 1960. But we're sticking in the year 1960 because we had kind of leapfrogged these things and we had jumped ahead back in that was back in November. We had watched The Shadow of the Cat. We still haven't quite caught up to that, but we're starting off, or we're continuing the addendum series this month with Hell is a City, which was released May 1st of 1960 there in the UK. I guess I'll start off with, had you seen this movie before?
No, this is the first time I'd seen this one, and it was actually that's been the case for I think all the addendums that we've done has been the first time I've seen these.
We're in the middle of kind of a thriller run here with you know, it's kind of on the fence with Never Take Candy from a Stranger, right? Where that's kind of thriller suspense with elements of horror. But the same here. I mean, this is pretty much full on like crime mystery thriller type flick. And we've got a few more lined up after this, and we'll tease toward the end of the show what we're going to be talking about next month. But yeah, we're kind of a little bit on a Hammer thriller run here before we return back to the horror. And it'll probably be sometime in the middle of the summer by the time we get, you know, directly back on actual Hammer horrors. But, you know, that's part of the gimmick is that we're watching the Hammer horrors and the thrillers that they released in chronological order. We just had to kind of go back and fill some holes before we got, you know, back to the regular scheduled programming. So that's what we've got here. But yeah, I'd never seen this one. Honestly, I don't even think I'd ever even heard of this one before. And, you know, we talked about it beforehand. We came up with our Hammer rating, you know, which is our star rating 0 to 5, and we call it Hammers for Hammer Horror and Order. And we'll talk about what a rating is, you know, towards the end. But this one's interesting because it's kind of elements of film noir, right? But it's not completely film noir, right?
Yeah, it's got it definitely first of all, the title that is very film noir. Hell is a City. That's just that evokes a film noir, you know, just title for the movie. And then the opening is very film noir. It opens with a police car with the music that's kind of like I mean, again, Naked City or something like that. Very, very film noir soundtrack, and then close up of the front end of the police car driving through the city or whatever. And then most all of the nighttime shots strike me as sort of the cinematography and lighting is very film noir. But once it settles into the story, that's more kind of a standard like police procedural thriller kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting that I love that they did have those film noir elements in it, because the film noir genre, we haven't done any of those on the show yet. Maybe we could squeeze probably some in on Cult Corner at some point or whatever. But it's another kind of favorite genre of mine. I mean, I'm no expert in film noir by any means, but and there's a lot of them that I do like. So I appreciated that element of this movie.
And I'm sure a lot of that comes from the fact that this is actually based on the 1954 novel of the same name by Maurice Proctor. So I'm sure, considering the time period, you know,
Hmm.
this was made in 59, comes out in 60, based on a book from 1954. So you're kind of right in the middle, or at least towards the end, really, I guess, coming out of the other
Yeah,
side of the film noir era, right?
technically, I guess. I mean, right now I'm trying to remember exactly what the. I mean, I used to kind of know what the official sort of years were that they had on there, but yeah, by the time you get to 1960, they were pretty much out of it. And but you had these movies that still evoked elements of it, and then of course, a little later on, as you get further out of it, then they would bring it back into like neo noir, which would be some movies in the 70s and 80s, and of course all the way up to today that used elements of noir, but in a sort of modern setting or whatever. So, but yeah, by this time, I think technically, I believe the years it's outside the years of film noir, so it's just using elements of it.
Yeah, and probably too, what's gonna bring that to mind when you watch it is the fact that it is in black and white. That's not gonna help that just in your mind, right?
'Cause, yeah, like I said, that cinematography, the nighttime sort of cinematography, is very much noirish.
This one was directed by Val Guest, who, we've done a number of his movies already. And I saw something in some of the research that I've done is like, this is by far not the last movie that Val Guest did for Hammer, but they considered it one of the last really good ones that Val Guest had done for Hammer. Because really, I think not long after this, they kind of took a complete shift to pretty much producing nothing but horror and sci-fi type stuff at Hammer, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be not too long when they would just focus, yeah, primarily on that. Although I think there's some more, I guess, I know there were some psycho influenced thrillers that would pop up here in the
Yeah.
'60s.
Yeah, I think they kind of because even in this one, you do get a little slight nudity, right? And you get some moments of violence and stuff like that. And those are kind of the calling cards of Hammer, especially you can see this is some of the early attempts at that type of stuff, right?
Pushing the envelope for this time period in the UK, especially.
So they're not full in there yet as far as like the sensationalistic, exploitative type elements that came a few years after that. But you can see this is where this is the grandfather, the first moments of them trying to start going that direction, right? Testing the waters. I mean, overall though, I think it's a solid flick. I mean, I don't think it's one that you're going to run out and holy crap, I need to go check this out kind of movie. But like, if you're a fan of that, black and white, gritty crime noir thriller type stuff, I mean, I think there's a lot to enjoy here. I mean, it's got a pretty good pace to it, and it keeps you entertained. So, I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's a solid flick. Well done by Val Guest, and and he also was one of the writers, or he was the writer, adapting the novel by Maurice Proctor. So, this is a Val Guest experience you're getting here.
they had some good characters in it too. Yeah,
And, yeah, and of course, I mean, Stanley Baker is the main, he's the main attraction. He's the main star of the movie, is Detective Harry Martineau. He does a wonderful job in this movie. Great job on his part. But you also get a smaller part from Donald Pleasance in this movie as like the banker, I think he was, or something like that, right? Like he gets robbed and he kind of gets drugged through it a little bit here a couple times in this movie. But yeah, I mean, like just to see younger Donald Pleasance, right? Who most people watching this or may or may not know that he was in the Halloween franchise, right?
not Dr. Loomis, of course. Yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting to see a much younger Donald Pleasance in this movie, although it's a smaller role, right?
yeah, that is, and he was in a lot of British. I can't now. I'm not sure how many Hammer films he was in. We'll find out as we go along. But I know he's, of course, in a lot of British films.
I didn't look to
Even the
see how much he had done up to this point, but you know, knowing where we would go with Donald Pleasance throughout the years with Halloween and other stuff later on in his life and in his career, it's interesting to see him here as a much younger actor.
Yeah, and this is a good movie, but his presence in even bad movies raises the level, and I think some of the directors or producers, whatever, realized that when they were able to get him for some of the movies that he did that were middling, the storyline being like middling to just low nothing, but his presence always elevates it, and I mean here it's just a cameo, it's a small role or whatever, but not to say that like again this movie's not bad by any means, but anytime you see Donald Pleasance in a movie, it's gets a smile on my face.
And then they do manage to keep it completely from becoming completely predictable, right? Because for the most part,
Yeah,
you kind of have the feeling, I know how this is gonna kind of go, like paint by numbers kind of thing, but they do switch it up in certain parts of it to where like, okay, well maybe this isn't going to go exactly the way I thought it would. But you could definitely tell too, and I'd read somewhere that like I think they had kind of intended this to be the beginning of like a series, and you can kind of get that feeling that like, you know, I don't know, what would you compare it to, kind of a Dick Tracy type of thing, or I'm sure there's some comparison and I'm blanking on there, but like something like that, you could see that they
Yeah.
might have had a plan for 5, 10, 15 more of these, Detective Martineau movies, and I guess it just never took off in that direction. Not to mention, I think I saw somewhere too that Stanley Baker kind of priced out not too long after this. Like Hammer couldn't afford him anymore, not long after this. So that probably killed that.
And like I said, I don't know. We don't really do any kind of deep dive into box office numbers or things like that. Like I don't know. I mean, I guess the popularity, it wasn't popular maybe enough as they maybe hoped it would be for to continue with other movies in the
It got really
using us.
good. It got really good critic reviews from what I could tell. I never saw any numbers like you said, but critically at the time, I think it was seen in a positive light, especially for, once again, already Hammer had that reputation. Even by 1960, they already had that reputation. So for a Hammer flick, even, they were getting good grades. It's just, I guess it must not have been successful enough to continue with it. Not to mention, I think they were seeing so much more success with their horrors and stuff that,
Yeah,
that, well, we're just going to go that direction. Why fight it,
yeah.
right?
Not what I was gonna say is that they definitely were seeing international numbers
Yeah.
from the horror productions. Selling them in all kinds of markets across the world. So
And I
I'm
think
sure
what
that's probably the
And
reason
I
why
think
they
what you see, I think what you see here with this one and with what we watched last month with Never Take Candy from a Stranger is that you could tell that they were trying to diversify the portfolio, so to speak. They were trying to do some stuff like, we don't want to just be the Dracula mummy place, we want to do some other stuff, and then you can see how that went. So
yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah, even like you said, even Christopher Lee himself, right? He didn't. He
yeah,
didn't want to. He wanted to do that one Dracula movie and then kind of put the Dracula character away, I guess, and because he didn't come back, as we already know, because we did Brides of Dracula, right? That
yep,
he didn't reprise his role in that one. But of course, he came back to it, as we will get to in later episodes.
absolutely. Well, I guess that's pretty much where we'll end it here as far as talking about it, but we'll leave it with what our rating is. Smoke and I came together beforehand, and we kind of figured out where it fell in our pecking order to give it the hammer rating that that it deserved. So we landed on 2.5 hammers. So I think that's right in the middle. It's fair. I mean, as far as like compared to other ones that we've watched so far in the series, it's got the same grade as the Quatermass Experiment, the Shadow of the Cat, and the Snorkel. They all got 2.5 hammers. So I think that's a nice soft landing spot for it. Not bottom rung. Like so far our bottom rung is the Stranglers of Bombay. So it's not quite on. It's above that. It's better than that, but it's definitely not top flight hammer. But still a solid flick to go check out. Would you say?
Yep, yep. Oh, and it just struck me, and we were talking about detectives. Who was it you had mentioned? Dick Tracy, right, or
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that. How about Mike Hammer? That would fit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Similar type of stuff. And that was the kind of stuff that really took off too. Like what in the 60s and into the 70s, right? Those kind of like detective procedural type shows and stuff really took off.
Definitely.
What all happened?
Carried and all that stuff, even all the way up to like what Equalizer and
Yeah.
you know, I'm blanking on the
I mean, you still see them today, but now we kind of live in the era of the police procedural where like it's not just like one detective or one guy taking care of business. It's
yeah,
here's
the
the
whole department.
whole department, like all the inner workings of it. So yeah, those things just they're evergreen. They really just never die in some ways. So and you're seeing some early influences of that right here. So I think for no other reason, if you're fans of that type of stuff, you'll probably enjoy it. So we recommend go checking it out. Um, we're still in the Hammer Horror Addendum mode of things. Like I said earlier, and we're going to continue the trend next month, and we're going to be talking about Stop Me Before I Kill, aka The Full Treatment. I think Stop Me Before I Kill was the U.S. title. The Full Treatment was the UK title, and that came out in February of 1961. So we're almost caught up, not quite, but we're almost caught up. Get back to regular programming here in the next couple months. So it'll be interesting to check that one out. I've never seen that one. Have you?
Yeah, Hammer Horror Addendums are introducing both of us really, or all of us now, because I know pretty sure Donnie hadn't seen that one either. Two ones that we had never seen before, anyway. So
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
some of them was lower tier, not lower tier in the content necessarily, but just that most people don't think of these when they think of Hammer films. So
no, yeah.
I'm glad I'm
Yeah,
calling.
you think of Hammer, you think of Frankenstein, Dracula, Mummy, that type of stuff. The sensational, over the top gothic horror and stuff like that. But these are solid flicks. Nonetheless, these other ones that none of us have ever checked out, like you said. So that's cool to get these in the mix too. So yeah, that's what we'll be
Listener,
watching.
listener or watcher or whoever that that recommended that we go back and pick these up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And when they did, yeah, a couple people too had mentioned a couple of these titles directly. Like they mentioned the Stranglers of Bombay, although we didn't necessarily love it. It was still, a decent watch. But they had mentioned a couple of these titles that we're catching up on specifically. So, like you said, good catch. So, yeah, that we'll leave it there for this month and come back in the month of April next month for Stop Me Before I Kill. So, for Will, Donnie, Tiana, who couldn't be with us, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh. We are the All American Spook Show, and we will talk to you next month.